Hi everyone, I'm Ken, and welcome to my workbench. Today we'll be talking about my hobby of rocketry. Why don't we start with low power and work our way up to high power? Now where should we start? How about we start small? This is built from a kit. It's actually a rocket. The construction is made of a cardboard tube, balsa wood fins, and a plastic nose cone. It uses miniature motors, solid propellant, 10 millimeters, and the recovery is a little unusual. Since it's so small, it's feather rate recovery, where basically the motor ejects out and both parts fall down, and it's so light that it's not dangerous at all, and it falls down very slowly. This is called a mosquito. Now, if you put in a fast motor in it, good luck because it'll disappear and you'll never find it again. Now, moving on up, this is more of the regular size model kits, model rocket kits that are produced by Estes, the #1 brand of rockets in the US. This was actually the second rocket that I built, and I built this for my daughter to launch. This also, again, has the same construction, has a cardboard tube, plastic nose cone, and balsa wood fins. It uses bigger motors, about 13 millimeters. Now, this one is more of the typical recovery where basically, let's say the motor boosts the rocket up. And this is an example of one of the motors. Solid propellant again. You put it in there. You ignite it with a remote launching system. It launches up. And then at the apogee, near the top, the nose cone will be, once the propellant is burnt up, an ejection charge will be fired at the fore end of the motor. And the nose cone will pop out, and out will come a parachute. Usually this one should be attached to the body. There's normally an elastic cord or something like that. This is an old rocket, so the cord may have broken. And basically the whole assembly comes down in a parachute. This way your rocket comes back down and doesn't get damaged. Now I'll put that on the side. Now that one required construction. Basically I had to paint everything, I had to glue everything together, follow the directions in the kit form. There are other rockets that are easier to build, and they come mostly pre-made. This is a popular one that Estes made, and is a crayon rocket, as you can tell. It's very popular with the kids in the schools. Now, I'm not sure if they make it anymore. They may have stopped, which to me is a shame. But basically, it comes already pre-colored in this tubing. This is cardboard tubing as well. But comes with a pre-assembled plastic fin can. Makes things easier for you to, for kids to assemble. And all you do is cement on the fin can. Attach on all the required parts. And this one, again, has a parachute as well as elastic cord. Put in the motor, get a launch system, and you're off. Rockets of this size and smaller can be flown in local parks. That's not a problem, at least here in the US. Now, of course, this doesn't go back in. That's usually the case. Let me put that on the side as well. Hopefully I won't step on it later. Now, the opposite of pre-made kits is something scratch built, meaning you take your own materials and you build the rocket on your own. Now, this is a rocket that I scratch built using materials from a kit that's actually this one. This is a kit that came. It had a tube, some cardboard fins, plastic nose cone, and some other parts. In this case, it has a streamer instead of a parachute because they're so small and lightweight that you could use a streamer is like a long ribbon. Streamer to just come down straighter as well as like softer than nothing. And this one I basically built it. It's a semi-scale or very close to scale model kit of the Tomahawk cruise missile. And I use a tube from the kit. I had my own nose cone. I built the wings myself here. I cut the fins out of the cardstock. And I decorated the vinyl decals myself using a Cricut vinyl cutter. Now, this one's unusual because I was actually testing one of the systems which I thought up. And I don't know if you can see, but the mid fins, they move. There's actually a system inside that's gravity induced stabilization. I also even had a locking mechanism, but that one's kind of fouled up from the ejection charges. So basically, the whole idea is that the rocket, as it flies up, the fins will remain pretty much vertical and keep the rocket going straight rather than off to an angle, because usually winged rockets like this will fly off to the side. And in testing, it seems to be working very well. So this is pretty much semi-scale scratch built. Now, talking about scale, put this on the side. Scale model rockets are actually very popular. This is another model kit by Estes. I'm not finished painting, just maybe a little bits I have to paint the fin. But it's a scale model kit of the Mercury Little Joe rocket, which in the 1960s they had these used for testing for manned space flight. And there's a little capsule on top. Again, this is one of the ones with the parachutes where the top pops off. Pretty cool scale. Put that on the pile. Clear the table a little bit. Okay, now moving on. Possibly, the opposite of a scale kit of an actual rocket would be a fantasy rocket. And here we have one of those such rockets. And some people will call these odd rocks, meaning odd rocket or unusual rockets. And if you can tell, this is pretty much not a copy of an actual real life rocket. Now, some of you may have recognized this rocket because there was a cartoon done by Gary Larson, who did the Far Side comic strips, where there were some scientists around a poorly built rocket that did not follow the plans that were a straight rocket. And basically the one scientist said to the other, we'll have to admit that we're really not rocket scientists. So the story behind this is that the person who developed this kit, his friend saw the cartoon and said, I dare you to make a rocket out of it. And he did. So he created this rocket kit. It actually flies. It was all crooked and everything, very unusual construction. And basically, again, this one has a parachute. The top pops off. The top pops off. And the parachute comes out. Now, as you get more experience, you can start to... This one I followed the directions on the kit. Because for me, I like to know more about the kit, especially something unusual like this before I try to modify or build it differently. So I built the original kit like this. I decorated it myself with Wile E. Coyote, from the Warner Brothers cartoon Roadrunners, and Acme Arsenal, because the rocket itself is called an Acme. Now, after I built this one, I built another one to modify it. Put that down. And here's the one I modified. You may have seen pictures of it earlier. It has a pipe cleaner, Wile E. Coyote. See, that's the thing about rockets that I love. It allows you a lot of freedom of expression. You could build a kit the way it's instructed, or you could modify and change it as you like. The more you get experience with it, the more you know how much you can modify and change things. This was my first attempt at pipe cleaner art. At the time, my daughter was really into pipe cleaner art, making all these little birds and animals, and I was amazed. So I tried it myself using her pipe cleaners, and I was amazed that on my first attempt, I got a pretty good Wile E. Coyote from the cartoon. Now, I modified the rocket further. Instead of the usual construction where the top pops off and the parachute comes out and everything comes down, I modified it for break apart, where after the motor boosts up and then the ejection charge shoots through the rocket, instead of a parachute, the rocket comes apart. This is called break apart recovery. And there's also a streamer. This is pretty old, but the streamer will come out and the rocket will come down in pieces, almost like Wile E. Coyote got blown up. And the crowd seems to love this rocket. I just need to adjust it a bit, fix it up a little. So this is called break apart recovery along with the streamer. That's supposed to come down like a mess, and as you can tell, it's pretty much a mess now. Let me put that down somewhere. Clean up the workbench a little. Oh, and that last rocket uses 24 millimeter solid rocket motors like this. And as the rockets get bigger, usually you'll need bigger motors because they weigh more. There's more drag. So as you go upscale, you know, through low power to mid power to high power, you need bigger and bigger motors. Now I touched upon odd rocks. Let me show you a bunch of different odd rocks. I know I have some here, somewhere here. A whole box of them. Also, there's different motor configurations. A common odd rock is a saucer type. And this is one. I decorated myself with prisms. And basically these are very high drag, so the rocket motor boosts up. I think this one's 18 millimeters. Boosts up, and then when the motor expends itself, it just comes down, and it's just a tumble recovery where it tumbles down and the drag just slows it down. This is another saucer, which I modified. Normally, the bottom half was the original saucer kit. It's drag recovery too, but I modified it so that, I don't know if you can see, it has a little alien on top. This one tends to have the bubble break off when it lands, so I have to find a very soft landing area. Here's another saucer, but this one's unique. Remember I mentioned different motor configurations? This is a stage rocket, a stage saucer rocket, where there are two motors inside, two of the small 10 millimeter ones. And the first one will boost up, and then when it shoots the ejection charge, it'll fall loose. Now, pretend that's the motor. It'll fall loose and tumble down, and as it shoots the ejection charge, you'll light a second motor in here, and this will get boosted further up. This is called a stage rocket. Let's see what else we have. There's also space-themed fantasy rockets. I'm sure most of you will recognize this one. It's R2-D2. This was built. This kit was available in the 70s through 80s, and this one's a little unusual. And let me remove it from the stand. In that it has a pop pod rear ejection recovery, where the motor ejects out in a pod, and there's a wrapping with a parachute in there. I have a larger kit where the head pops off and the parachute comes out of that. Here's another one that's unusual, but it's actually more of a conventional style, but they just added more effects. This is supposed to be a little alien rocket. Head pops off, this parachute inside. Very fun rocket. But gives you an idea of the different styles available. And finally, this is one of my favorites. It doesn't look like much, right? But this is called a copter rocket, where you put the motor inside, it shoots up. Let me see, get this right. It shoots up, and I don't know if you can see the steps here. It creates almost like an airfoil effect, a rotational effect. As it shoots up, it'll rotate really fast. And then when the motor expends itself, they'll start coming back down, spinning really fast. These are really cool because it's very simple. Doesn't go very far. Okay, let's put these away. Oh, I have one more fantasy rocket. Now this one was built from a kit from Estes, and this is called a Venus probe. I don't know if you can see it. It's getting bigger. Now it looks like a kind of unusual rocket, but still mostly standard fins and long tube. But at ejection at the top, let me see if I can get this right. It'll pop out, and the alien will come out with its own separate parachute, and then ideally will land on all four of the legs, the lander legs, which are on suspensions. So my daughter loved this one because she called it Alien in the Hot Tub. This one's just a mess to put back together. It's like, let me see if we can get this right. Okay, we got it. Now rockets are getting bigger, but before I go bigger than that, right now we're still talking low power. Here's another motor configuration. It's called cluster, where there's more than one motor in a rocket, and they're both lit at the same time. In this case, there are two of them lit at the same time, and it's unusual. This one's unusual because it's canted. The motors are canted at an angle, and it's supposed to be pointed at the center of gravity, so that even if only one motor lights up, meaning the other one doesn't by accident or by mistake, they'll still go somewhat straight. It's very clever, because it's at an angle. It'll still go somewhat straight, instead of going around in circles and loops. Okay, oh, here's another one. It's getting bigger. These are now getting close to mid-power. This is another one that's fantasy in a way, but based a bit on a Learjet. It's called LexJet. It's built from the kit. Looks like a pretty cool jet. It's beautiful when it flies up. This uses 29mm motors. So that's when you start getting the mid-power and even some high power, 29mm. Okay, let's see what we have for high power. Oh, before I go to high power, there's more mid-power. Now this is a different construction. This is can be fiberglass or carbon fiber. Carbon fiber is very expensive, but very light and strong. And a rocket like this can go supersonic with a small motor, meaning it can go faster than the speed of sound, Mach 1, I would say. The trick is to have some type of electronic tracking so that you can find it after it disappears. You know, it'll probably come down on a streamer, but it'll go up so high and so fast that oftentimes people lose sight of it. So this one is one I'm working on. I might try it this year. Okay, now we're going into mid to high power. Where should we start? First, the rockets get bigger. This is another Estes kit. This is called the Megader Red Max. Styled almost like World War I German military. It's kind of amusing. It's got a lot of decorations. And the motor is a 29mm. You can usually tell by the size down here. And this one is very big. It's got big fins. It goes up pretty slow, but with a roar. And it seems to be a crowd pleaser because it doesn't go up too high. A lot of people see it up close. People tend to love this rocket. I've flown this one a lot. This has a big parachute inside. They put that on the side. Okay, now high power. This is my first high power kit. It's called a Sumo. It was made by the company called Aerotech, and they call it a Sumo. But I decorated it further myself. If any of you are familiar with Street Fighter, the arcade game, I modeled the Sumo, and I was only given the head of the Sumo as a decoration. I made a copy of the body of one of the characters in Street Fighter, who is a Sumo. His name is Honda. I made a copy of the body and put it there, along with his flying fist. And this is the one that I qualified for level 1. Basically, the larger motors, thinking it was a H-size motor. The motors go according to an alphabetical system, A on up. I think the largest I've heard of for amateur rocketry may be O motor, but possibly higher. And for level 2, you need, for level 1 you need an H motor. For level 2 you need a J motor, and level 3 you need an M motor. M is Mary. The M motor is probably about this diameter, I'd say. So this one's unusual because construction is cardboard tube with plastic fins, plastic nose cone, but you use super glue or cyanoacrylate to assemble the fins. And also it's further unusual in that it has a piston ejection system, meaning when everything pops out. Let me see if I can get it. I was a little stuck. The piston pops up and pops everything out. Okay, let me put that on the side. Now the high power is a lot of fun. it's more fun. I would say the little rockets are definitely fun, but the high power rockets are more entertaining. They do take more time and they cost a lot more. The motors, as they get bigger, cost a lot more. Currently, the motors I launched, the J motors and such, are close to about $100 US. I think before the inflation, it used to be maybe $70 US. So it does get expensive as you get larger rockets. Now, as the rockets get larger, you can tell I'm straining a bit. They get heavier and the construction has to be stronger. This rocket, the maker called it the Punisher rocket, and I basically decorated based on a Punisher cartoon, comic strip or graphic novel, comic book, excuse me. And what's interesting about this is as the rockets get larger, there's more risk of problems or danger or loss if the parachute doesn't come out. So at that point, you should really start building electronics in there so that everything's more guaranteed to work. And this one does have electronic system. So when the motor boosts the rocket up and the motor ejection occurs, if something goes wrong, it has a separate compartment here with electronics inside that will set off charges, separate charges, to pop this part off, which has a small parachute. Is down there, trust me. I hope you can see this. And then as it falls closer to the ground, you can set it so that a bigger parachute will pop out at a lower altitude closer to the ground. That way, if a big parachute came out at the top of the rocket's height, it might drift far away. So you want a small parachute to come out at the height, drop down a bunch, and then closer to the ground, a bigger parachute comes out. So at a set altitude, something like 100 meters, or 300 feet, and there's electronics inside, it'll pop off the other side, and a bigger parachute will come out. So everything will come down nice and gently. The electronics I built myself too. They have kits that are available, but I've also bought electronics that were pre-made. Now this one's fiberglass, so it's heavier, it's more durable, but at the same time, since it's heavier, you need bigger motors to launch it on. Okay, we're almost there. Now what else have we got? Going back to odd rocks, you can also build odd rocks that are high power. And I plan to use this, which is almost like a floor warning banana, wet floor warning banana. And I plan to make this a rocket either later this year or next year. This one probably will be high power because it's so large. So there's a lot of creativity that goes into rocketry, and it seems almost like if you're an entertainer, you would enjoy it because it entertains the crowd. The kids love it. You should see their faces when they see something like this go up. Put that down. Okay, now I do have larger rockets, but usually the larger rockets, I won't have too much space here, so I'll build them out in the garage or on the deck. And I do have larger and larger ones I have planned. Here's an example of a nose cone for one, which I'll probably build next year. But let me see if there's anything else. Oh, one more thing. There's also the possibility of upscaling. Like, let's say here, I don't know many of you are familiar with the Battlestar Galactica series back in the 70s. This followed the Star Wars movie in, I think, 1978. And there's a ship called the Viper, Colonial Viper. Estes made a kit of that many, many years ago back then. And I think it's pretty cool. This is either the actual kit or a copy of the kit. But someone else made an upscale kit for larger motors right here. And they made it a little longer so it's more stable. The shorter and the less like a rocket it is, the more weight you have to add in to make it stable. So this is an upscale, but you can go further upscale. And this is one that I'm working on right now. Here we go. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. Okay, I think that's pretty much it. On that note, thank you very much. I hope it was very entertaining to you and informative. If you can and you find this interesting, I recommend that you try to find a rocketry club by you in your area and just make a day of it. Go out there, see other people burn up their money to entertain you and themselves. And if you have kids or children or anyone you know, bring them along. The kids find it very fascinating. They love the variety. It gets them involved into the sciences, creativity, crafts, working with arts and crafts, as well as outdoors work. So with that, thank you very much. I appreciate it. You take care now. Bye.